The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog is leading an emergency meeting after Sunday's US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Members of the International Atomic Energy Agency, they're in Vienna to assess the escalation and the risks. Both Iran and the IAEA have said there are no immediate signs of radioactive contamination around the three sites that were targeted by the United States.
First of all, we must return to the negotiating table. And for that, allow IAEA inspectors, the guardians on our behalf of the NPT, to go back to Iran's nuclear sites and account for the stockpiles of uranium, including, most importantly, the 400 kilograms enriched to 60%.
The discussions come as Iran's parliament considers suspending its cooperation with the IAEA.
The subsequent illegitimate use of force by the US, apparently a recognized depository of the NPT, targeting safeguarded nuclear facilities of Iran, occurred despite the fact that the agency's inspectors maintained an uninterrupted presence at these facilities for a long time, and all operations conducted therein were subject to the agency's monitoring and verification. This ruthless act has inflicted a profound and systematic blow to the credibility and legal coherence of the NPT and international non-proliferation regime.
Well, our correspondent Jonah is in Vienna and has more on the emergency meeting.
The IAEA's full board of governors, all 35 members of the agency in closed-door session behind me there, talking about those attacks by the US on Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend, some loudly decrying them, the Russians and the Chinese in angry voice, some perhaps more moderate. Rafael Grossi, the Director General, issuing an urgent call for maximum restraint, a return to negotiations and a return to inspections in Iran. We have heard from the Iranian ambassador to the IAEA, Reza Najafi, who came out. He was pretty combative, talking about a clear violation of international law, made worse, he said, after the illegal US aggression represented an attack by one IAEA member and signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty against another IAEA member and NPT signatory. This caused Iran, he said, to question the functioning and effectiveness of both the IAEA and the NPT. We know, of course, that there are moves afoot in Iran to draw up a bill in Parliament there to pave the way for Iran to leave the NPT. That wasn't discussed here, but Ambassador Najafi concluding his remarks, reaffirming Iran's right to self-defense and saying that Iran would make moves to neutralize the threat against it at a time, in a manner and in a place of its choosing. Jonah, Al Jazeera in Vienna.
Stay in Vienna. We're going to speak now to Elena Sokova, who's Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, joins us live from the Austrian capital, as I say. So, Elena, just as a bit of background for those watching, the NPT came into force back in 1970. Currently, more than 190 countries are signatories, and its aim, of course, is to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. Do you fear what is happening now will drive Iran out of the treaty altogether?
First of all, thank you for having me, and a kind of good continuation of the discussion based on the previous speakers' points on that. I think that Iran will likely consider that option because it doesn't have many other options in terms of response to it. And I'm really concerned that it could do really irreparable damage to the treaty, to the NPT. As your previous speakers mentioned, other countries may reconsider their options as well. And overall, the regime has been holding for so many years. It has been hailed as a big success. So more countries acquiring nuclear weapons is certainly a very disturbing development. And if Iran pulls out of the NPT and goes for reconstructing its nuclear weapons program, it won't happen overnight, but it may be the option that it may choose.
How important is the NPT? Just to try and put this into context for us, to explain, just what's at stake here.
Well, first of all, if you go back to the history, one of the reasons the NPT was negotiated is to actually prevent more countries from acquiring nuclear weapons. As NPT was negotiated, there were 5 states that had that technology. They happen also to be the P5, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. But at that time, the estimates was that another 20, 30 countries would acquire nuclear weapons. And many actually countries that you would be even surprised to see on the list were seriously considering developing nuclear weapons. So the regime itself is considered a big success because it stopped that scenario. And we only had, in all this time, North Korea is the only one that left the NPT and developed nuclear weapons. So many countries are watching what's going on in Iran nowadays and its next steps. And indeed, it would be a big blow to the credibility of the NPT, to the ability of its verification system that the International Atomic Energy Agency implements, and so forth. But overall, global stability is going to be affected as well.
Of course, Iran was still submitting to inspections by the IAEA before Israel's strikes happened. So would you accept their argument that they've done, they've honored all their parts of the agreement?
They have been submitting themselves to the IAEA inspections. And in fact, the level of inspections that Iran had under the JCPOA, that 2015 Iran deal, were unprecedented. And the international community got a lot of information about the materials, their locations, the enrichment, and everything else. There have been concerns about some issues, particularly lately. And when Trump administration pulled out of the JCPOA, some of its provisions for extra inspections were already functioning inadequately, and some were dropped. But nonetheless, the IAEA had a very good picture of what takes place in Iran with the inspections that it implemented. There were issues, and particularly the issues about some earlier efforts by Iran, including its prior to 2003 nuclear weapons program or alleged weapons program.
Okay, Elena, we'll have to leave it there. I do appreciate that. That's Elena Sokova speaking to us there from Vienna. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.